Would you like to know what it means to have something be out of scale? Well, stay tuned and find out. Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're here to hang out and talk about neat interior design topics. In this video, we're going to be talking about scale and proportion and what that means for interiors and what we mean by if something feels and looks out of scale. So if that sounds kind of interesting to you, I'd love to have you stick around. And thank you everyone for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. So let's get started. Scale and proportion are part of what we consider to be the principles of design. So it's almost like a guide to how we put different elements in a room together. And scale and proportion have to do with size. So, size is the actual dimensions of an object, but scale and proportion have to do, I always kind of think of it as, a relationship between objects, or objects and a room, and having them relate to each other in their scale, and it could be in their actual size, and looking at each of those objects or looking at objects in a room and comparing them to each other to see if that makes sense or not. And lots of times we'll say, oh, that looks out of scale. And so we notice right away that, something is off and that, it may have to do with scale and proportion. And in this example, there is this little space here for a couch or some other piece of furniture. And there's this chunky couch there. And right away, I would say this couch looks out of scale. It may fit back there, the width of the couch fits in that little area back there, but the scale and size of that couch is just too chunky, too massive for that area. So it's out of scale with that area, with that room. And if we just switch it out with a smaller little sofa, that's more in scale with that space. So it's working with size, but it's working with relationships in between objects or objects and a room. So why is it important to, try to have everything be in scale in a room? The furniture in scale with the room, or the furniture and other objects in a room in scale with one another. Well, it's a way of creating balance. And, our eyes want to make sure that things feel connected, feel cohesive, and having things relate to each other that way in, how large or small things are and the scale of things, it helps us feel more comfortable, and the room looks better and it just feels better and it just makes more sense. So, thinking about that, using that as a tool when we're putting everything together in a room is really important, and just something to keep in mind when you're designing your own spaces. So let's take a look at some examples of where things may be out of scale and what we can do to correct that a little bit. So this first example is the bedside lamps, and they are just way out of scale with the bed and everything else going on in that room. And they match the chandelier, so I get that. They're trying to, repeat that as a bedside table lamp. But the scale, the size of that lamp in relationship to the bed and everything else going on there is way too large. And it has to do with, balance. You want to, notice the bed first, and then everything else kind of supports that. And so just, sizing down those lamps a little bit, that would help a lot. Another example is this office chair with this desk. So there's a relationship between those two items, and the office chair is way out of scale. Or we could go the other way around and say that desk is out of scale with the office chair. One or the other needs to be changed so that it's more cohesive. So, just a simple item like that, like a desk, and then another item office chair, just the importance of having those two items relate to each other, because in that way it's more comfortable and it just makes more sense. And then here's this really wonderful fireplace. It has this very tall fireplace wall, and they've placed these little dishes or candles on the mantle, and they're just very out of scale with this whole big entire fireplace feature. And maybe the best thing to do would be just to not have anything on it, and just go with that cool architectural feature and let that be by itself. Otherwise, we'd want to put something on the mantle that is in scale, that is in more proportion to the size and scale of that fireplace, so it makes more sense. And then, when we think about relationships between different items, we can think of like a dining room area or a kitchen table area. And there's always this relationship between the table and chairs and the light above it. And so, to make sense of everything, we always want to create a cohesive look around a whole dining room area. And, if the chandelier or hanging pendant is way out of scale, it's just, too large of a chandelier to have above a table, or if it's too small, just things look out of scale. They're not working well together. So just thinking about that, to create, a cohesive look, it's when, items are related to each other in a number of different elements, but one of them is about scale and, thinking about, creating a look that feels cohesive and that makes sense. And then another example where we can see the relationship is out of scale is with this coffee table and these two big chunky sofas. And it's, the coffee table is just out of scale with the size of those sofas. And, that's another thing about, there's a relationship there, that coffee table relates to the sofas and it creates a whole look. So we want to make sure that it all kind of makes sense together. And so using a little tiny table with these big chunky sofas just doesn't make sense. And so, maybe they could easily just move that round, circular, almost like stone, heavy weighted piece of furniture over there instead. That will be more in scale with those sofas. And then when we think about a room and we can consider, say, the whole grouping, the whole furniture arrangement, and how that relates overall to the scale of a room. And this is a really cool space. There's beautiful high ceilings and it's super bright, airy, and there's a lot of different, functions going on. There's a kitchen, dining room, living room area. But that living room area, that whole grouping together related to that room is just out of scale. That area can be much larger, a larger area rug, and just starting from the very beginning and just, using up more space to be more in scale. And I think that beautiful chandelier that they have above the living room area actually is a good start, maybe starting at that and thinking about how to relate the scale of that whole furniture arrangement to that chandelier, and then of course to that entire room. Thinking about that a little bit more, we can create something that looks more in scale. And then in this room where we have high ceilings, again, it's not as, not as high of ceilings as that other space, but it's that same thing about, sometimes that's challenging to, if you have high ceilings, to, have everything in that room kind of feel like it's all together, that it's cohesive, that it's all in scale together. And that can be kind of challenging. One thing I think that is working really well in this room is, they're using kind of bigger furniture. And so, that helps to be in scale, be in proportion to to that whole space. Plus, they're working with some color, and I like how they use color, that blue area rug as the main area rug, and then I think there's another one by the door, and pattern. And it creates this balance. There's this balance where you kind of look at that area rug, and it helps to tie everything together, bring everything in proportion to each other so that, it feels approachable and comfortable to us, and just makes a little bit more sense than that previous room. So I encourage you, when you're out and about or even at your own place, just to take note of scale and proportion happening. So, how are elements relating to each other or relating to a room? And, are they in scale? Are they in proportion or not? And what would you do differently to make them more in scale and more in proportion? So share what you find in the comments, because we'd love to hear what you find out. And I just want to thank you again for watching, and I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.